Well, this ought to be interesting. We've got, a good story, a little surgery, and a knife review coming up. Stay tuned, guys. Hi, gang. Rob here. It's the evening of 22 January 2014. And wow, this is a complicated one. I've got a knife laying on the table and got my microfiber cloth for good knife care. Got a Torx driver and a knife. So, what are we in store for tonight? Well, let me move some of the hardware out of the way. First of all, let's talk about the knife. This is sort of a guest blade, and for sharpening, among other things, as it turns out, from my customer and YouTube viewer Chris, this is the Knives of Alaska Featherlight Hunter. And this has been previously reviewed on YouTube by the legend Nothing Fancy, and a knife that was intriguing to him and is intriguing to me. And not because it's very normal, not at all, but because it is so off the beaten path. At least off the beaten path for us modern tactical knife community guys, the keepers of the super steel, high-tech material, ultralight killing machine blades, the modern cool stuff. This just isn't very cool. It is kind of modern, though, in its materials and construction. I remember actually, and I hate to go down this path, but I remember watching Nutton's review on this knife, and I thought, dude, did you hear the name of the knife? It's a Featherlight Hunter, and it rolls in front of the camera on the Nothing Fancy project with two mini nylon zip ties, cinched up to the opening hole. Dremel tool cutoff wheel jimping cut in the spine, and some holes drilled and a pocket clip mounted. You just couldn't let it be what it is, which is a really cool little skinning and gutting knife for small to medium size, even white-tailed deer size game. He just couldn't let it be. So he had found this little, what he thought, I guess, was a diamond in the rough. Sort of an off-the-beaten-path knife company using some pretty cool materials, interesting construction, hunting knife. And it just had to be a Nothing Fancy knife. So in comes this Franken knife in front of the TNP camera. The one we're looking at tonight has not been so modified. It's just pretty much bone stock, except for that gleaming near mirror polished edge. And those of you with a keen eye will see something interesting on that edge, won't you? And if you look closely again, you're going to see a real tiny Theapostlep sharpening notch at the base of that edge, which came out beautifully, I believe. Okay. Let's talk about the knife first. And I'm going to forget Franken knife for a minute and just keep it focused on what this really is. We've got a 3-inch bladed drop point blade, lots of belly, looks to be 3/32 thick D2 tool steel, hardened to about 60 to 61 Rockwell. Full flat ground. Not super thin behind the edge. As you can see, my 15-degree secondary bevel is not super broad, but not super tiny either. I would guess it to be 25 thousandths, probably behind the cutting edge. Good medium thickness cutting edge, I think. Certainly adequate with a good edge on it for skinning. But also, if you run into a little bone with it, it's not going to be super delicate. One thing that I think works on the eye a little bit when you look at this knife is sort of a horrendously out of whack blade to handle ratio. And that's, believe me, it's only out of whack aesthetically. Functionally, let's think about what this knife is used for. I live in Northeast Indiana. This is whitetail country. What would we use this beautiful little 2.1 ounce hunting knife for? And lots of us guys who hunt deer really like small blades. And here's why. We're doing post-mortem surgery and trying to do as little damage to the delectable venison that we've just harvested. So what do we need? Most of that surgery is going to be done inside an abdominal and or chest cavity. So we need a knife we can get a good grip on in a saber grip, or sort of a sideways saber grip, or a choke up grip. You see, I made fun of Nutton for his jimping up here at the base of the blade. We don't need it there for hunting. If I'm working in the chest cavity of an animal and I'm reaching both hands up in there and I'm cutting things loose from the chest wall, I might be holding a lung out of the way while I'm trying to peer up in there and cut an aorta. There are things we worry about when we're doing this. Number one, are we going to nick any organs or intestines that are going to taint the meat? Number two, as we're moving stuff around with our offhand, where's the tip of my knife blade? Am I going to cut my finger? This jimping up here on the spine of the blade is exactly where I need it to be. I know there's an inch from the end of my finger to the end of that blade. As long as I don't invade that area, I'm safe, and I've got superb indexing and enough handle that I've got total control of that blade. These guys at Knives of Alaska, they know how to design a hunting knife. And what this is exactly what the name implies. It is a Featherlight hunter. It's not a tactical knife. It's not really even an EDC utility knife. It's something that's going to go in a small hunting pack. Even I get in a tree stand with a fanny pack on. I need a very light complement of tools for the type of hunting I do. I'd be all over this knife. Construction-wise, let's look at it. It is made of two G10 handle scales. The lock side, of course, is lined with stainless steel, and it is nested. That houses the liner lock. Pretty straightforward liner lock mechanism. The offside scale has no liner. The construction method is 3 shouldered pillars, so it's extremely easy to clean design. Debris will flow right through it. There's no lanyard hole. Nothing on this knife that doesn't need to be here. It is a working tool. The lock is adequately strong for the type of knife it is. I mean, it's probably more than adequately strong. There's 0 up and down play, 0 side to side. Of course, I've had this thing apart and adjusted it. Access to the liner lock is very simple, very easy. Sort of easy to open, very easy to close. If you're right-handed, there is a little relief cut in the G10 scale to get to the opening hole. For us lefties, a little more tricky. Kind of have to dig at it. But it's doable. Kind of an interesting looking pivot, isn't it? And we'll get to that. It's pretty cool. Despite a bit of a problem, which we're going to look at. But look how short the blade stops in the handle. That's not a mistake. This blade is the length it is for a reason, and this handle is the length that it is for a reason, and good reasons. I love this design. And it just feels like a very well-built knife. The opening and closing action on this thing is really rock solid and very smooth. Did I mention it weighs 2.1 ounces? 2.1 ounces. Tiny, tiny, but very solid. I love it for what it is. Except, a funny thing happened on the way to the post office. I mean, I had gotten this thing sharp, and I mean screaming sharp. That edge performs as well as it looks. Knives of Alaska's website says that the edge bevel is ground at 18 to 20 degrees, and I don't know, it wasn't very even from side to side, or it wasn't very symmetrical from side to side. The angle was, I would imagine it was within 2 degrees end to end. It might have been 18 to 20. Just wasn't super well done. It was, adequately sharp for a factory knife, but it took a little bit of work. And down here at the base of the blade where you see my sharpening notch, I had a pretty big, arc from cutting edge to ricasso. It would have ripped the heck out of my stone and my sharpening or my polishing tape. So to make it easy to put a really good edge on all the way to the back, we notched it. And when I finished, man, was I happy with it. The tip came out great. The cutting edge ended up, that's another thing. The main grind of the blade is actually very good. Notice how my consistent angle bevel is the same width from tip to butt, from tip to base. And oh, that D2 gets sharp, 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 sharp. So I'm done sharpening, I'm done stropping, I'm ready to take this thing apart, clean all the slurry and the grit out of the pivot, polish up some washers, lube it up, put it back together, tune it, make it all ready to go home to Chris. And let's just look what I found. Here, this was a little bit of a concern. Look at the blade tang, just where it goes into the handle. I thought, what's that? What could that be? Well, let's just look. I'm going to take this thing apart for you on camera. First, I want to show you something really neat. Great pivot design. I mean, super cool. Got a nice, not super fine threaded pivot screw, but adequately fine for good holding. And, oops, punch that pivot out just a little bit. Oh, guys, didn't get my reading glasses before I started. That wasn't a good plan. Okay. Now our blade should slide out. This is kind of interesting. We have a nylon washer on the opposite side of the knife from the lock, or I'm sorry, on the lock side of the knife. So on the side of the blade that has very little pressure. What appears to be a phosphor bronze washer is actually not. It is actually a T-shaped bushing that acts as a washer on the side of the blade that's opposite the lock. But look, it's pressed into the blade. It is also a pivot bushing. So what we've got, let's take the pivot here. we've got a really precisely fitted pivot. I mean, really precisely fitted. Very cool. And I'm guessing, I haven't talked to Knives of Alaska, but I'm guessing what happens is that this bushing gets pressed into the hole in the blade, and then it is reamed to a really nice micro finish and a very precise diameter. Great idea. I mean, a great idea. If you also notice, there's a stainless steel collar in the G10 scale opposite the lock. And there's also a little sort of mini liner in that side to give it such a solid pivot. It's steel everywhere and a big old phosphor bronze T-nut. Notice the chamfer on that collar matches exactly the head of that screw. Exact same angle. Just super, super neat construction. Now let's get to the problems. And this, I'm going to be as objective as I can here. Now remember, guys, I'm kind of guessing about the manufacturing process. But do you see what I see here? Now this is a bearing surface. It looks to me like something happened during the reaming process. I've got this big gouge that comes from the center of the hole all the way to the outside of the washer. Big gouge. And then I've got more marks. Some radial marks on the blade tang, little ticks. 2 rows of them. One just outside the washer and then one all the way out here. That's what we were seeing when the blade when the knife was totally assembled, blade and handle. Something happened. We had a tool spinning. We had a knife blade come out of a fixture maybe. We gouged the blade tang, which is cosmetic and visible when it's assembled. And I got a big gouge in this washer here and another one over here. Now, these things wouldn't matter because when the knife comes to me, I'm gonna run these phosphor bronze washers, this T washer in this case, over some 1000 grit sandpaper and 2 sides of a strop, and it's going to be flat and it's going to be near mirror polished. This gouge means nothing. Maybe if anything, it just holds a little lubricant. But still, when you're charging $65 to $90 for a 3-inch bladed folding hunting knife, American-made quality, and a human being ran this operation, basically scrapped a bushing, scrapped a blade, put the knife together, put it in a box, and shipped it. That's bad. I mean, it's really bad. A human had to see this. He had to know it happened. And for something that bears kind of a premium price for what it is, and is marketed with made in America quality, this should just never happen. Who knows the circumstances? Everybody's human. Everybody makes mistakes. A lapse in judgment, a physical mistake, an accident, and here we are. So I'm going to attempt. You know what? I got to take this all the way apart. Sorry, guys. But we had no function problem. I thought, it's okay. Knife works just fine. It was buttery smooth. That gouge really isn't hurting anything. I knew Chris had already owned the knife for a little bit, so I'm sure he saw the marks in the blade tang. I'm not going to say anything, I might have mentioned it just so he knew, but I wasn't going to condemn Knives of Alaska. Did you guys wonder why I had this big tube of fluoro grease? Here's why. These little ears on the applicator work great as little mini pry bars. Completely safe to the material. That's your tip of the day. Okay, let's put this sucker back together. Gotta put our female pivot in. Then our, where did I get? That thing is hard to see. Our nylon washer, our blade, our scale, whoops. And my big old fat hands in front of the camera isn't helping you guys. Sort of put everything together loose. So still, you know, I see that and I'm thinking, huh, somebody got away with one. Whoops. And then I get it all back together and I, you know, start to do what I do. Yeah. Assemble the knife loose. I mean, I don't mean loose, I mean not really torqued. Everything's where it needs to be. Now we're going to crank those body screws down. Nice tight fit, by the way. And see where we're at with our pivot. Well, that was pretty lucky. That was about perfect. So what I did, do what I always do. You know, how well does it close? How well does it open? How close to free dropping is it? Do I have any side-to-side play? Like right now, I'd probably make it a little looser. I got a little play. Okay. So I like that. I always kind of do this with it to see if I can close it with the index finger. That's a little tighter than I like. So I do that a few times, and man, I'm thinking, great, we got perfect blade centering, which we still do, even with that sort of rushed reassembly. Great lockup. And then I open it up and, you know, wanted to admire my sharpening work. Now, when Chris had sent me this knife, he said, hey, by the way, there's a little nick in the cutting edge. You know, don't worry if you can't get it all the way out. And I thought, you know, I'll pretty much get any nick out unless it requires so much material removal that I'm shortening the life of the blade. And I worked on it and it came out and it looked great. I look at my edge to admire it. Just I'll let you guys look at it. And I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but guess what showed back up? Yeah, can you see it? The nick is back. It is right there. Why? Well, I'll tell you. I don't know if the light's going to be able to show this or not, but if you look at this standoff right here, well, it's got a nice little groove cut in it. Does this remind you of another green knife you've seen on this channel? Yeah. We have a cutting edge impacting a backspacer, in this case a pillar. This radius right, excuse me, this radius in the blade tang right here is supposed to contact this pillar, which acts as the stop pin in both the open and closed positions. That interface right there is supposed to stop the blade, and what ends up stopping the blade is this pillar on the cutting edge. Guys, this knife should have been scrap. And somebody at Knives of Alaska really needs to know that their process is out of control. I don't know if this is a plasma or laser or water jet cut blade blank, but you get a design here that frankly just doesn't need to cut it this close. It wouldn't hurt anybody if that blade stopped. Gee, it could stop there, and you don't have any tip exposed, and you still have a really small knife, but it goes all the way to there, and we run into a pillar. Some part of this process, whether it's the blade blank, whether it's the diameter of the pillar, or whether it was just a badly engineered package altogether, something is out of whack here. Whether the blades are out of tolerance, or whether the tolerancing isn't adequate to prevent that interference, I don't know. But Knives of Alaska has a problem with this knife, and it's kind of a serious one. I do know that Chris contacted KOA this morning as soon as he woke up to a text from me, which probably wasn't that nice of me to send that at midnight last night, first thing he woke up to, telling him of the problem. He contacted KOA this morning. They were very receptive. He also did a little research online to find out that there have been other problems that customers have reported with Knives of Alaska, and they are very responsive. In fact, one account that he read, they actually reimbursed the customer for his return shipping. So this is one we're going to want to stay tuned on and pay attention to. And guys, please remind me, if you don't hear back in a couple weeks at how this was resolved, remind me to follow up, because I think this is really a superb little blade, but we've got some quality assurance issues and some process control issues at KOA that make a pretty tight little package with, I guess, a requirement for a process in control pretty tightly that's just not. Kind of surprising too, because it's a very well finished knife. I am really, really, really shocked to see these two issues with it. And I really hope I can make another video here in a few weeks to tell you that Knives of Alaska has discovered their process issues, that they've got them corrected, and that Chris has a replacement knife in his hand with no money out of pocket for postage. Because whoever designed this knife deserves to have a production process in place that represents his design well, because it is a good one. So, stay tuned for part 2. Grace to you and peace, my friends, from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, the word and 99% of Chris's knife edge are sharp. Have a good night, guys.